Hey, John Ty here, and welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit. Our guest today is a multiple number one best-selling author with books in the fitness, self-help, and publishing niches. And through his courses, which include Kindle Bestseller Secrets and Hooks for Books, he's trained thousands of authors how to write, publish, and market their books successfully. And today he's going to be talking about creating captivating titles that sell more books. Our guest today, my friend Derek Doepker. Derek, welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit.
Hey, John, glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Great to have you here. Great to have you here. So, um, looking forward to getting into the titles things is so critical. But before we do that, just give us a little bit of your background. Your publishing background and some of the tell us about some of the training that you've done, and then we'll dig into the titles, creating those great titles.
Sure thing. Well, I started back in 2012. Like a lot of people, I was looking for a way to earn some money online, especially sharing the things that I was passionate about. In this case, it was health and fitness. So I started out blogging, at a YouTube channel. I was trying a lot of SEO tactics and different things. Nothing really took off for me. And I actually ended up winning a Kindle Fire for posting a blog comment, and they had a raffle winner and I won it. So
Yeah.
I had in my hands this Kindle Fire, and I had written like a 350-page book that I couldn't sell, to my own family, basically. And so I thought, well, I have all this content, I have all this writing through my blog and this book I put together. I wonder if I can turn it into a Kindle ebook. I had heard it mentioned here and there about, this upcoming Kindle thing. So I created one book just kind of as an experiment, put it on Kindle, didn't sell. But I thought, okay, I'm going to keep looking into this. So I bought some books, some courses, and published another book, How to Stick to a Diet. And then I noticed, a handful of sales come in, and it was probably less than $100 that first month that I made, but it was new people that were starting to follow me and come back to my blog. And I thought, okay, this might be a nice way to build a following, build up my brand. But I never really saw the potential with Kindle publishing as more than just a supplemental type of thing. And then in December of 2012, I did things a little bit different. I started to kind of ignore some of the things the gurus were saying, and I just followed something that was in my heart, and did things the way I felt I would, want to receive a book. So just as a little foreshadowing, one of those things was ignoring this whole like stuffing your book title with a bunch of keywords and creating a really captivating book title that I knew would grab people's attention, and creating a book that I really would want to read instead of just, trying to game the system and, put crap out there to try to make money. So I created a book that I loved called 50 Fitness Tips You Wish You Knew. I applied some new marketing tactics. I know your book, Crush It with Kindle, was helpful for me. Tom Courses Knowles, the Kindle Publishing Bible was very helpful. And that took off. It became a #1 bestseller in weight loss in the paid store. So once I generated over $5,000 in royalties in 11 days, I thought maybe there's something to this whole Kindle self-publishing thing. So then I just dove into it. I started teaching other authors my tactics and strategies, put together my course, Kindle Bestseller Secrets. I've since published several more books that have gone on to become #1 bestsellers in their niches. And I basically continue to this day to experiment with things in the self-publishing world. I publish my own books constantly, and then I'm also helping other authors publish and market their books.
Great stuff and great results. Good job you kept going.
Now,
Going from $100 to $5,000 in a few days is great. So getting onto the idea of titles, let's start out by, let's talk about why having a good title is so important. Why does it make such a difference?
well, imagine you're going into a bookstore, and I'll basically preface this by saying a lot of what I'm talking about is nonfiction oriented. So the principles, though, that I'm about to touch on are equally applicable for fiction or nonfiction. And this first principle is attention. If you don't get a person's attention, you don't have anything else. And if you think about the world that we live in, everything is demanding your attention. There's so much stuff out there. We're overwhelmed. And unless something grabs your attention and makes you stop and pay attention, you're just going to overlook it. So imagine this is something I did. Go into a bookstore. You're looking for a book, let's say on self-publishing, and you look at the bookshelf, you're going to see all these books. Now, are you really going to stop and pull out each book one by one, look at it, read, the testimonials and the back content? You're not going to do that. We don't have enough time and desire to do that. So we skim. Most of us are just going to skim and look for what grabs our attention and stop and check out that book. Now, it's the same thing on Amazon. You type in self-publishing or how to self-publish or self-publishing marketing, whatever it is, you're going to see this big list of books. You're probably not going to stop and check out every one. You're going to scroll. You're going to see what grabs my attention, what looks relevant to me, what looks interesting, what looks like something that's going to be new content that I don't already know. So we're making these mental shortcuts, and the title, those two things are the first thing we're going to notice. And that's going to be the thing that determines whether a person takes that next step to actually check out the book and read the reviews and the description and all of that. But if you don't get that attention grabber, if you don't get a person to stop and go, this could be relevant to me, none of the other stuff that you've done will matter. It doesn't matter how much work you put into the book, doesn't matter how great it is, doesn't matter what the reviews say, doesn't matter how interesting your description is. If you didn't get their attention with the title, then you don't capitalize on any of that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Now, I like the point you make about it doesn't matter how great the book is and how much work you put in. If you don't grab that attention, first of all, it's all wasted. So I was going to ask you, Derek, are you familiar with, the little blue books from back in the 1920s and 30s? I mean, not from the 90s, I know they've been in print for a while, but and it was, I've got the name written down here, Emanuel Haldeman Julius. Do you know that guy?
No, I don't.
Well, I was just, because I had this interview coming up today, I was just doing a little bit of homework, and he's famous. He's sold, I was checking out the Wikipedia entry, and it says he sold somewhere between 300 and 500 million books. And he was selling these books at 10 cents and then 5 cents during the Great Depression. And obviously did very well selling that number of books. But he was great at testing. He used to split test the titles of his books. And basically his criteria was if it wasn't selling at least 10,000 copies a year, he would either test it and either improve it by changing some variable or, basically put it in the bin. And so I just wrote down a couple of examples here. So, and basically, so what this is, these are the exact same books, the exact same bindings and everything else, sold through exactly the same channels to exactly the same group of customers. So the only variable that's changing here is the title. And here's one. The Fleece of Gold was the original title of one of the books. It sold 6,000 copies during the year. So it didn't meet his 10,000 in a year criteria. So we changed the title to The Quest for the Blonde Mistress. And so it went from 6,000 sales in a year to 50,000 sales the following year, just by changing that title. Another one here, None for the King, sold again 6,000 copies in a year, changed it to The Lustful King Enjoys Himself, and that jumped to 38,000 sales in a year. And then I got the third example. What is it? Pen, Pencil, and Poison, 5,000 copies sold. He changed that to The Story of a Notorious Criminal, and it jumped to 15,800 sales the following year. So, and there's lots of other examples. I just picked those three out. But it's really interesting how literally just that one thing, that one title change, you go from 6,000 to 50,000 sales in a year through the same channels to the same people is just incredible.
Yeah, and that's you brought up a point there about testing, and that's so important because we can think we have a great title or even a great book cover, but if we don't test it, especially testing it with the target market, ultimately they're the ones who determine what the best option is. So a person can ask me, they can ask you, hey, what do you think about this title? And my response might be, based on experience, I think it's good, or it could use some improvement in this area. But I would never say, oh, that's a guaranteed winner. It's okay, that looks good. Now let's maybe get a couple other options and then test this, survey it. And another thing that you brought up, those are great titles. So it's once again equally important for fiction. Or actually, I don't know if I'd say it's equally important, but it's very important for fiction to have, that interesting book title. And some of the things that stood out to me with those titles that you just mentioned was that there are some words that grab your attention: lustful, notorious criminal. There's something about that. They're emotionally engaging words. So one of the ways to kill your book title is to put very boring, generic words, make it sound like every other book title. If you can throw in some words that have an emotional charge to them. So like I just, the word kill, things that will kill your sales, or things that will do, in a nonfiction arena, that will jump out a little bit more than, things that will, lead to less sales or whatever. So thinking about emotionally engaging words and words that are a little more unique can be just one take-home point in terms of spicing up your title.
Yeah. And so somebody's got their book. What would you say is the starting point? I mean, take us through the process that you would go through, you would take a client through to create, because I know there's lots of things that you do to create a great title. So, let's go through those.
The first step would be researching the market, which I would assume any author is going to be doing this anyways. The thing is, as you're researching other books in your niche, start to explore the ones that are, first of all, tailored to your target audience, and see what they're doing. See how they position themselves. And this is for two reasons that sound kind of paradoxical. The first is you want to learn what you can imitate or what you can model, because if it's already working and a book is already, see multiple books that are #1 or multiple books that are bestsellers, and they're doing something similar, that's a take-home point that this thing that they're doing seems to be working. But as much as you want to imitate what they're doing, you also want to do something different. You want to get a little creative and throw in your own twist, because if you just copy exactly what someone else is doing, you kind of get lost in the shuffle. It becomes like a Me Too book or a knockoff book. So you want to think, how can I stand apart in this particular market? What can I do differently? What will make my book exclusive among all of these other books? And so there's a number of strategies, and we might get into, specific things, but you are just taking in a lot of the other books in your niche. And then you can even expand yourself outside of your niche and start to look at other areas. So I can look, if I'm writing a fitness book, that doesn't stop me from looking at books on self-help or business or these other categories, and see great book titles that they have and say, can I maybe do something similar now over in this fitness arena, which is going to help with the more creative process where you're maybe combining two different worlds, as long as it's following the principle of, is it attention grabbing? Is it going to make a person stop and want to check out this book and go, huh, that's interesting, that's unique, I haven't seen that before.
Okay, good. So yeah, next question I got for you, Derek, is really about titles and subtitles. So, when I'm creating my books, I tend to think of the title and subtitle as having slightly different roles, but I'd be really interested to get your take on, how the title and subtitle work together, what it is they do.
Well, generally speaking, the title, well, let me start with the big picture. Title and subtitle combination should really answer two questions as a total, and that is, who is this book for, and what kind of benefit are they getting? So even in fiction, there's going to be words and things in the title that give the idea that romance books are going to have generally a certain type of title and cover. And in nonfiction, obviously, it's easy enough that you want the whole thing to say, who it's for. So if it gets really overly creative and vague, then you lose out on getting that target audience. So when it comes to title, general ideas are that shorter titles work well. No more than 5 words. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that's generally something that people have. And a title can be somewhat more vague So I think that just off the top of my head, I believe there's a title called Manology. And so it's a little vague. You're not sure what it means. And then I'm going to go off the top of my head. I think it's Secrets of Your Man's Mind Revealed. And that's the subtitle. So that's where you go, okay, this is a book for women. It's about understanding men. And you get the more specific details in the subtitle. So generally speaking, title, a little more vague, a little more general, big picture. Subtitle, more detailed, who it's about. It might be a system. It might be the 7 steps to whatever, or the the principles for blank. And that will give you the more structure of how the book is set up and who it's for and things like that. And now in fiction, you can use the subtitle to target, even just throwing in something about, the book series or the romance series of whatever, where to let people know the genre that it's in. So that's basically how I look at the title and subtitle combination. And once again, since each niche and market can be a little bit different in terms of common practice, just researching the other books in your niche will give you an idea of how they're typically going to be worded in terms of title and subtitle.
Yeah. And, touching on something you mentioned earlier on, and you said that, when you made your changes and your 50 fitness tips became very successful, one of the things you said was, not keyword stuffing, but, at the same time, we need some keywords so that people can find us on Amazon. So let's dig into that a little bit. What's your take on keyword research and how to incorporate keywords into your title stroke subtitle, and when to leave them out in terms of making sure that you have a great title?
My approach with keywords is that I would treat them as a secondary thing.
Yeah.
So the most important thing for me is, what is this going to grab attention? Is this a great title? Have I tested it and it's showing a good response? Then if I can, I'll work to include the keywords. Now that might simply mean adding some things into a subtitle or elaborating in the subtitle area. And generally speaking though, like with my book, 50 Fitness Tips You Wish You Knew, the fitness tips is a good keyword. But overall, I really don't think it's that responsible for how much traffic I get. So it's not something I encourage people to focus a whole lot on compared to write for a reader, write for a real human being, more so than the Amazon algorithms. But once again, if we can have a great title and some great keywords in there, it's even better. So I like the site merchantwords.com, which will let you do some research on Amazon keywords. So you can go there and you can type in, keywords related to your niche. Obviously, you can browse on Amazon. You can start to type in some phrases into the Amazon search bar, and it will give you recommended, other keywords and things to search for. And then there's the Google Keyword Planner. And those are basically the 3 main keyword research tools that a person can use. There's also some software and things out there. But once again, it's very secondary, and the key is to make it sound natural. So when I see these book titles like The Ultimate Weight Loss Tricks to Lose Belly Fat and Get in Shape and Get 6-pack abs and lose 57 pounds with the juicing diet detox, when I see these run-on subtitles where they're just trying to get
keywords there, Derek.
Where they're just trying to get as many keywords in there. It's like, it looks, first of all, you're not probably going to rank that well for all of these things. So the take-home point, choose 1 or 2 maybe main keywords that you're going to have in your title, subtitle. But it just doesn't look natural, and readers can pick up on that. And so my kind of rule of thumb is, I want my book titles and subtitles to look like something you would actually probably see in a bookstore. So I have to ask myself, and that's a good rule of thumb for the cover as well, would I actually see this title, subtitle, cover combination in a bookstore? Does it look professional, or does it look like someone just threw something up on Amazon, stuffed it with keywords, and are just trying to, make a quick buck off of it?
Yeah. So to sort of summarize then, if you can have keywords in naturally, that's great. And that's obviously going to help you rank on Amazon. But it's secondary. And, and this is something I always say, don't sacrifice a great title just for the sake of putting keywords in there. And I think that also by having something that's natural, that grabs attention, that people respond to, that actually is going to help with the Amazon ranking anyway, because, Amazon is going to track, how many people, when your books appear in the search results, how often do they get clicked on relative to the other books? How much time do people engage on your book's page, reading it, clicking the look inside feature? How many go through and buy the book? And so going back to all the things that you've been saying about, this grabbing attention and, speaking to people, what the book's about. And so I think is really critical for the book's long-term success.
Yeah. And, I don't want to disregard keywords altogether. I know there's been some people, especially in the fiction realm, and I know Nick Stevenson has talked about changing his keywords and seeing a nice, boost in sales just by changing the keywords he was targeting. But even still, that wasn't going through and changing on the title and subtitle. That's going through and changing, a few things in the description and in the 7 keywords Amazon gives you. So I definitely encourage people to, experiment with keywords, and it can benefit book sales. It's just when it comes to the book title, like you said, a title that gets clicked on and bought will help your overall book sales more than having a title that ranks a couple spots higher for a keyword. And all you have to do is search Amazon for highly popular keywords. I've done this, things like weight loss or, romance novel, and you'll see that some of the top ranked books, in the top 5 position, don't necessarily sell that well. They don't have that great of sales rank, despite the fact that they are ranking for these incredibly popular searches. So it's not that keywords aren't important. It's not that we don't want to consider them and make the effort to include them in our marketing efforts. It's just that, if I only have so much time to invest in my book, that's not where I invest most of my energy is in the keyword. It's going to be more in making sure I have a title that really speaks to my target audience and that they love and that they can't resist clicking on it to check it out.
Okay, so let's dig into the mechanics of the title now. And obviously, we want to grab attention. That's absolutely paramount. We've got to speak to the right target audience, because you want to grab the attention of the right people. Otherwise, it's not going to convert. So, there's a lot of things that you can do to, and again, there's so many things you can do to make a title good. You can't necessarily include all of them, but just recap on those things, the different kind of things that you can include in a title to make it really stand out.
Yeah. So right now, a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of big picture idea, grab attention and stuff like that. But then naturally it's like, well, how do I do that? What's the actual practical
what are the
steps
tactics
that I can take? So that's what I get into in my different trainings and things like that. So I'll share a couple of the specific tactics that a person can use. So one thing is anything that is controversial or contrarian. So this goes against popular opinion. I'm going to throw out a few examples. Goals suck. Okay, so goals suck. Or the low carb myth. Your kids are your own fault. These are going to be things that are a little controversial. You can even look at headlines. So I actually have some headlines that I brought up. So these can be great, blog headlines or things that you see on magazine headlines are also very applicable to book titles and subtitles. So why clever post titles are killing your blog. Greg Narayan, I'm trying to give these people credit. SEO is dead. Anything talking about this popular thing being dead or a myth or whatever goes against popular concept, because instantly your brain goes, wait, that's not what I'm used to. Goals suck. Aren't goals great? So it grabs a person's attention. A slightly less controversial way of doing it, but somewhat contrarian. Brene Brown's book, The Gift of Imperfection. Okay, so imperfection might be something we put up with, but she's saying the gift of imperfection. It's this thing we see as a bad thing, but now she's saying it's a good thing. So that whole idea of how can I set myself against popular opinion? Another thing, the truth about paleo, right? So once again, we're in the nonfiction world because that's what I specialize in. But it's, the whole principle is this is controversial. This is different than what you're used to hearing. And so if you can take a position that goes against the grain, even if you tie it back. So I'll give one more example. Neil Patel had one, and it's why successful people are douchebags. So that was a very controversial blog post that he had, but of course he ties it back in and says, it's not really true. It's not totally the case, but that's what some people think. So this is the idea that you can take a controversial stance or go against popular opinion. Anytime you can do that in your title, subtitle, and even in various areas of your description, that's going to be an attention grabber. It's going to make people, especially if they disagree, a lot of times people, if they disagree, they're even more inclined to want to check it out and see what this person is up to. So that is one tactic, the contrarian approach or the controversial approach, that will be an attention grabber. Another method. Well, did you have any comments on that? Otherwise, I can go.
No, I think that's great. The only thing I was going to say was I was just thinking about those examples you gave, and of course, what happens is as soon as you read or hear that, your mind is automatically asking a question. Now, you gave the even if the question isn't in the title, it's sort of implicit. Well, why is imperfection a gift? I want to know. And as soon as your mind or your prospective reader's mind starts asking that question, they want to answer it. We want to know what the answer is, and of course that's what I think one of the reasons it's such a powerful approach.
Yeah. So another tactic that can be used would be basically, and this is very common, some sort of unique mechanism to accomplish an end result. So let me give an example. A very popular book, the 5 Love Languages, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a book called How to Have a Better Relationship, right? That's the outcome. But the way you do it is with this unique thing called a love language. What is a love language? You get curiosity in there, and it shows that there's a means of having a better relationship by using this special thing called love languages. So anytime you have, the 7 principles of happiness, or it's even better if it's something people haven't heard of before. So another example would be Steve Scott has his habit stacking approach, so that's one of his books. So habit stacking. What is that? It's a special approach to, developing habits and having more habits. So if you can come up with like a clever name or a clever system or some way to package the information and deliver it, ideally, if they haven't heard of that before or heard of the phrase, that triggers curiosity, that gets their attention. It makes it seem more believable, because a person could say, okay, I know there's a lot of books out there on how to have a better relationship, but maybe what I was missing is I didn't understand these love languages. And now that I'm going to learn about this, that's going to be the thing that finally gets me the results. So if you want to do research, usually it'll start out, you could preface it with the word the. So the blank system, the blank method, and also very common would just simply be, the 5 ways or the 7 ways or anything like that. That's kind of saying these are the specific things that are going to get you the result. So once again, if you're in a highly competitive niche, you might have to make up kind of your own system. But in less competitive areas, just having a numbered list, I'm kind of alluding to there, that triggers some curiosity. So anytime you can throw numbers into your title and have a number of methods or tactics or whatever you want to call it, that will trigger curiosity, because people want to know what those things are. And it will give you a sense that there's a specific, set of, a tangible thing that you can wrap your mind around. There's just these 10 things that once I get these under control, I'm going to have then whatever the benefit is that I'm looking for. So that's one thing. If you have any comments on that, otherwise I can jump into, throw out another strategy.
No, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, it's powerful stuff. So yeah, jump on. Just give us the next one.
So another thing that I like is to go and flip it from how to basically be successful in some way to how to avoid mistakes. So my book, Why Authors Fail, 17 mistakes self-published authors make that sabotage their success and how to fix them. The whole positioning of the book is these are 17 mistakes. And now instead of just learning what to do to be successful, these are the things to avoid. And then here's what you do instead. And we're generally more motivated to avoid pain than even gain pleasure. So if you talk about the bad things to avoid, that tends to grab attention. There's a very popular post. I might not have the exact title right, but 15 things to stop doing to be happy, or something like that. The idea is these are things you need to stop doing. My book, Why You're Stuck, is somewhat taking that approach. It's saying you're making some mistakes here. This is why you're stuck. And even Rick Frischman, who I know is on here, has a new book with a couple other authors, Mistakes Authors Make, which I'm reading, and I highly recommend people check that out. So it's it's a very good approach where it's simple, because if you have any system that's the path to success, the 15 ways to do whatever, you just flip it, the 15 things you have to avoid, and you're just talking about the opposite way, and I think hopefully people can kind of figure that out. But let's say you're talking about you need to get accountability. The mistake is not having accountability, right? Everything can just be flipped to its opposite, and then you can still talk about a lot of the same content, but position it in a different way. So there's a lot of ways to phrase that, talking about the things that are you need to avoid, or the things that are killing your results, or the things, the hidden problems that you didn't know existed. All of this stuff will grab attention, because we never want to feel like we're making a mistake, especially without even knowing about it. So those are a few practical examples in terms of, some things that you can do to start creating a more captivating book title.
Yeah. And I just want to reinforce something you said, because I think it's so important. You talked about pain, well, the avoidance of pain being more motivating than the pursuit of pleasure. And just to back that up, there's a lot of studies have been done, and anywhere from 2 to 3 times, and two is the sort of typical number, avoiding pain is twice as motivating to people as the pursuit of an unrealized gain, is kind of how it's phrased. So it makes sense that you're going to get better results if you have something in there that teaches people how to avoid the pain, or flags the pain that they're going to have as the solution. And it's something, I don't know if you're familiar with Evan Pagan and the stuff that, Evan teaches a lot of stuff, but he talks about how it's important when, a great way of introducing something is to talk about, let's say you're doing a presentation, to talk about, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, these are all the things that are going to happen, all the bad things that are going to happen. On the other hand, if you do X, Y, and Z, here are all the good things that are going to happen. So you're giving the pain and the benefit. So you're getting 2 bites of the cherry. So it's exactly that you're covering the same subject matter for both elements effectively, but you're getting much more power out of that. And obviously, you've got to be more succinct if it's a title stroke subtitle, but the principle is still there. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think it's a great tactic, and I really like, and it's been very successful for you. And just wanted to emphasize the psychology that underpins that.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, even though I put it in the context of title, subtitle, I use many of these strategies in the bullet points of my books, in the book description, and in the book's content. So like you just brought up, for a person who's a nonfiction author, in terms of being more effective and having more impact, when you get into a topic talking about, just like you said, here's what's going to happen if you don't do this, here's what's going to happen if you do this. And that's what actually motivates people. And that's a great way. A lot of what I've studied, and I sometimes touch upon this, are these influence skills. And I really credit a lot of the success I've had to learning about how to influence and impact people in a positive way. Because if a person's reading my book, I want them to go out and apply this information. I want it to change their life. It's not enough for me to just make some book sales, which is great. I love getting messages from people who said, I read your book and I acted upon it, and here's the results I got, and my life is different and it's better now. And it's my responsibility as the author to learn how to create that impact by giving them the perspective. Hey, if you don't do this, I don't like putting anyone through pain. I like, let's focus on all the great things, but maybe briefly reminding them for their own benefit, there's consequences if these things aren't followed. So for instance, if a person, authors, if you don't get a good book cover made, like, there might be consequences. You might invest a lot of time and energy in putting a book out there, and they just miss that one point about doing a book cover. They think it's something they can skimp on, and then all of a sudden they're not making the sales they could be making. They're losing money instead of gaining money, simply because they didn't realize the significance of what would happen if they didn't have a good book cover. So, I really take it on as my responsibility to make sure I can be as effective in my communication as possible, in terms of, giving people the perspective. Here's what happens if you don't do this. Here's what happens if you do this.
Good. Okay. And are there any other, I'm just looking at my sort of list of the things we covered. Any other elements that we haven't talked about yet? Because I sort of interrupted you there with that pain and pleasure thing. But what were you going to you come up with next?
Yeah, I was going to, those are some good starting points. If people want to learn more about, specific examples and more tactics and strategies, I have trainings out there, hooks for books and books that sell. But I like to empower people to really just come up with their own solutions. So if you want a take home point, I alluded to this, looking at magazines in the checkout line. You can look at magazines, and I actually think it was a headline, something like why you can't sleep or why you can't fall asleep or whatever. That's what partly triggered the idea for my book title, Why You're Stuck. I kind of modeled this whole why you have blank problem and said, okay, that got my attention when looking at it on a magazine. Let me take that idea and use it for a title potentially. So there's so many great examples of captivating headlines for blog posts. If you go to a magazine in whatever your niche is. So if you're in the health and fitness, looking at Shape magazine or whatever, looking at the headlines, Entrepreneur magazine, whatever it is, study their headlines, study what gets the most clicks and are the most popular articles, because a lot of times you can see the stats or whatever they're highlighting. And if you go, that's a really popular article, and if the headline grabbed your attention, that's feedback that they might be onto something. So, and then of course, modeling other successful book titles and things. This will all give you ideas to work with. And even once again, if it doesn't contribute to a book title or subtitle, doesn't mean you can't take the same idea and model it as a bullet point. So one bullet point could be, the 7 biggest mistakes you need to make or to avoid when, self-publishing your book or whatever, right? You can still use that all throughout your book's content. So really my whole point is learn how to grab people's attention, create interesting headlines and phrases that suck them in and make them feel like they're getting something that's really valuable and exclusive, and they don't want to miss out. That's kind of the feeling. Oh, if I pass up this book, I'm going to miss out on something that I need to know.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I like the idea of, yes, we talked about some tactics and some principles, some high level stuff, some tactical stuff. But what you're saying is part of the process is just becoming aware of the stuff that's around us. And you've got a media, especially the magazines and newspapers, and they test and they've been they write headlines for a living. So figure out get ideas and inspiration from those is great. And so that's really, getting into the habit of being alert to that stuff is really going to help your writing and your marketing stuff. And something else I want to ask you about, Derek, is, let's niche down or drill down even further into specific words. So things like, we hear people talk about power words and things like that. And, the use of you and your and things like that. Talk to us a little bit about some of the specific words that you might want to use or maybe avoid to have a successful title.
Yeah, so there's a lot of resources out there if people want to study, the most popular words used in copywriting. You mentioned you and your, I believe those are maybe, the top two words that are used. So those always grab attention because we're thinking about what's in it for me. But starting at a high level before we get into specific words, the high level concept is if a word or a phrase has been used over and over and over again, generally we want to avoid it. Now, it's not an absolute thing. It's not that I'm never going to say lose weight when I'm talking about health and fitness, but it's used so much that when we have these generic words, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. So this is why something like shred body fat or something like that would be a more interesting way of basically saying lose weight. Another thing, just words that have an emotional charge to them. So let's say it was a cookbook. I think I've used like insanely good recipes, like dangerously delicious might be an alliteration, almost kind of like, that's interesting. It's a phrase that you might not have ever heard before or heard in that context. Fresh is something we talk about with food, but maybe fresh new ideas for blank. So look for words and phrases, and you can find a lot of these lists out there. Just find something that would be more attention grabbing, and words that have to do sex and sexy are attention grabbers. Words that have to do with kill or destroy or something almost like a primal danger thing, or dead, SEO is dead is an example. So that can be used. It can kind of become cliche in certain areas, but if you notice these words, if you ever notice a word that jumps out and grabs your attention, pay attention to it. So I make a kind of a swipe file whenever I catch these different words, or just words and things that I like. And I sort of have that in my back pocket to when I'm trying to come up with something. Now I scroll through these list of words and see if something jumps out. So another example of a word that I liked was breakthrough. So I use that in a upcoming course I'm going to use that talks about breakthrough. Now, it's not that it's never been used before. Of course, it's a somewhat popular word, but it was just nice to have a list of words that are, that you find are attention grabbing. And then of course you test it and make sure that the audience finds it attention grabbing as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was just listening to you talking about that, and it reminded me of a newspaper article I read not that long ago, just a couple of months ago. And I'm sure, everyone's noticed this. A few years ago, restaurant menus started to become more elaborate and more descriptive, and use these elaborate terms to describe some things that often were quite ordinary. But somebody did an academic study, I don't remember who it was, one of the universities, and they found that not only if you had those kind of descriptive terms, like fresh for food, you mentioned that as an example, not only did people buy more from that restaurant, they would pay more for the same stuff. And there's no reason why that shouldn't apply exactly the same way to books as well. So also good tips if you've got running a restaurant as well as writing books. And so something else I want to ask you about, Derek, well, just keeping an eye on the clock here, is in your Hooks for Books training, you talk about hacking human psychology. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, remind me which section that was on, because there's so much stuff.
I just got the kind of the main things here. So you talk about certainty and variety, connection, significance, growth, and contribution. It's the sort of Tony Robbins, Medane kind of coaching fundamental to the system they use.
Yeah, so there's 6 human needs that we all have, and we could get very deep into this. But one thing would be, I'll use certainty and variety just in this context, and I'll only touch upon those two. So certainty is we like to know how everything's going to turn out. We kind of want things in place. But variety kind of goes to the opposite end of the spectrum, and that is we don't want to know absolutely everything because life would be boring. Right. So I give an example of going to a movie. If someone were to tell you the ending of a movie before you get to see it and spoil it, then it kind of ruins the surprise. But we
Yeah.
still want to have some certainty that we're going to enjoy the movie. So we might ask, oh, is it a good movie? You know, don't tell me what's going to happen at the end, but tell me if you think I would enjoy it. So we're constantly trying to balance sort of these two extremes. If we knew everything that was going to happen in our life, we'd lose all the excitement. But if we didn't know anything, if I didn't know whether the roof was going to stay over my head or if it was going to collapse, or I didn't know, you know, what's going on, someone could barge in my door at any minute, if it was totally chaotic and I didn't have certainty about anything, then everything would feel like chaos. So we're trying to balance these. And so people that live more in the world of variety, they like to have fun. It's more about options and different things. People that like certainty, they might eat at the same restaurants, order the same meal, so on and so forth. Now, when you understand this and you understand what's driving your target reader, you can speak to them more effectively. So as a book example, if someone liked variety, then they might like 101 ways to market a book. I'm going to use book publishing as an example. So 101 ways to market your book, or, you know, 1,000 ideas for social media book posts or whatever. They like the idea of options, being able to pick and choose and do something different all the time. But I think in today's world, there's so many options and there's so much information out there that people are leaning a little bit more towards certainty, which would be the top 3 ways to market your book. They don't want all the options. They want just maybe the best of the best, the #1 social media strategy for book marketing. That's speaking to a person's certainty needs. I just want to be certain that this is the one thing that I'm going to do. And then of course you might balance the two, something like 50 fitness tips you wish you knew. It's kind of like the best of the best things I discovered, but it's also a good number of options where it's like, not all 50 of these tips are going to apply to you, but you'll probably get a handful that do. So that's an important thing to think about, where as another practical example, let's say I have a book on minimalism and decluttering and things like that. I saw a book that had, you know, I don't know, 50 ways or 101 ways to declutter or clean up. And I just remember thinking, if I'm feeling overwhelmed in my life and trying to declutter, I don't want to read a book with 101 ideas that I have to sort through. I want a handful, you know, a much smaller number. And that's just one of those things that it goes a little deeper than what some people think about. But when you understand this and you go, what's really driving, what's the need that my target reader has that they're trying to fulfill, you can get a better idea of how you can custom tailor your title and your whole message to speak to that person.
Good, and that's really useful, yeah. And it's so true, isn't it? There's a tendency to think that the more, you know, the higher the number, 100 things, you know, 100 things is better than 10, and so on and so on, because you're giving value. But actually, it doesn't always work that way. It can have the opposite effect. And something else I want to ask about before we wrap things up, Derek, is testing. You mentioned testing earlier. Give us some examples. Well, you know, how do you test? What are the ways that work for testing titles and so on?
Yeah. So before I get into testing, I'll tie in the testing to what we just talked about, because I understand that some people, they might mistakenly think I'm saying don't go with the big numbers. And my response to that is, if you have a book that's 101 ways or 1,001 ways, that might be good for that target audience. You know, if a person's looking for, you know, 100 great first date ideas or 100 great date ideas, they might love having that as a reference book that they are going to be using for the rest of their life. And it's perfect versus, you know, the #1 best date you could go on or whatever. So there's room for all these different things, and you won't really know until we get into this idea now of testing and you know, trying the different ideas and seeing which one resonates the most with the people we're trying to reach. So when it comes to testing, there's a few options. If a person has an email list, they can test subject lines of their email. They can split test and see what the open rates are. They can run a survey. So this can be done, once again, through an email list. You can simply survey people, SurveyMonkey or any of the other survey services out there, and say, which title do you prefer? There is a survey company, PickFu, PickFU.com. And, you know, it's about I think $20 a survey, but it's really good, quality responses that you get. So that's an A/B type of survey. So if you have just two titles that you're trying to narrow down, that's a great way to test things out. And you actually get, everyone will give you some short response on why they chose one over the other. So that's a great service. Facebook ads are another option. So setting up a Facebook ad where everything is exactly the same, but maybe the headline is one title, the second headline is the other title, or if there's not enough room, the little description area would be one title option or subtitle option. The second one is seeing what the click-through rates are on those different things. And I'll just caution that a way to maybe not survey people is just thinking that because family and friends or fellow authors said that they recommended something doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to be right for the actual people interested in your book. So I could go on an author group and maybe run a survey about a fitness book I'm writing and get some good responses, some feedback, but I got to take that a little bit more with a grain of salt compared to maybe going to a group that's actually specific to people who are interested in fitness and my topic. They're going to be more the ones that, their opinion counts. Or if I ask, men what they think about a book title that's targeted towards women or vice versa, I have to take that into account, that I'm not really going directly to my target audience to get that feedback, because obviously we're all going to have our own tastes and preferences. So it's the ultimate goal is to try to reach our target audience when it comes to doing these different types of surveys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add something to that, which is, I don't know if you've had this experience as well, Derek, but I do a lot of testing, titles, book covers, that kind of stuff. And there've been a lot of times where I've had 2 or 3 ideas and I thought that's the one that's going to work, or that's the cover that's going to give us, and I tested it and it's been completely different. So what I think, and it's not that it's not that I don't understand, how to create a good title or a good cover or whatever, but it's not always what you think is not always what the market responds to. And one of the things I love to do is use emails. I almost always A/B split test my emails that I send out. And I was just looking while you were chatting there, and I record the results. And there was one test I did not that long ago, and one version of the email got the open rate was 137% higher, more than twice as many people opened that thing, and I only changed one word in that subject line. So it's hugely powerful. And I mention that just because I really want to, I mean, I know you know this, Derek, but if you're listening to this, I just really want to emphasize how important it is to test. And another example would be, testing covers as well. I know this is about titles, but as Derek said at the beginning, your title and your cover, they're probably the 2 most important elements to get somebody on the road to buying your book. Because if you get those wrong, it doesn't matter how good the book is. Again, I'm doing some work for a client and testing different covers, and the original cover that the client came to me with versus the cover that we ended up with after doing a bunch of different tests, the cover that we finished with was converting 338% better than the original cover. And we did this through Facebook ad testing, because you can use an image with Facebook ads. And so almost 3.5 times as many people clicking through on that thumbnail. And you think about how much impact that's going to have on your book sales, especially if you do something the same with a title and get a title that converts higher, it becomes exponential. So, thanks for those tips there, Derek, because I think it's really critical to be testing those things.
Absolutely. And this testing can take place kind of in the background, while a person is working on their book and stuff. I usually have the title, though, at least somewhat narrowed down before I ever start writing a book. And maybe that's a one point to bring up here, is that I get the title, the positioning, how I'm going to do my book before I start writing, which is different than some people who they write their book and then now let me go test a title or whatever. But the title is what helps me position what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about it. And, granted, maybe I'll change a number. Instead of 15 tips, it'll be 17, or, I add some stuff in. But for the most part, the title determines how I'm going to position the book, who I'm going to speak to, all that sort of stuff. That gets me in the right frame of mind to then now I go through and start creating the book's content. So it's not always a linear process. You know, things can
Mhm.
evolve as you're going through the book writing process, but it's definitely all part of that pre-writing research and pre-launch research is figuring out what the best title and cover are going to be.
Yeah, and I think that is very, yeah, again, crucial to the success of the book is getting that positioning right, knowing who you're speaking to, because otherwise, if you don't know who you're speaking to, the book itself becomes vague and it's going to be less targeted, less likely to be less effective. So I like the idea of starting with that kind of focus before you write the book. And so, okay, we're sort of coming towards the end here, Derek, so we'll wrap it up shortly. But just before we do, is there anything that we've missed that you think you want to mention to people?
I don't think so. I think, as long as people get these core principles in place, grab attention, the target audience determines the success, and then research what else is working, learn to model it. I'll just cover one more final point, and that is this stuff will take practice, and it will probably take getting some feedback. So it's not like I just got great at cranking out book titles. It came from practicing it and going through the motions over and over again. So if people feel kind of overwhelmed at this idea of, okay, I get that it's important, but I don't know if I'm any good at coming up with my title or whatever. It's like very few people are going to be great at this stuff when they first start out. Get out there, practice, come up with 10 different title ideas, set a timer for, 5 minutes and just, how many 20 book titles or whatever, where you're not censoring yourself. You're just boom, 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 cranking them out where you're not getting your, analytical brain in the way. Get the practice, and over time, you'll get better. And part of practice is feedback. So if you come up with a bunch of titles, but you don't know whether they're any good or not, get someone to help you. I'm happy if people want to send me their book title ideas and things like that. I can, share how they can get feedback on that. Or, once again, checking with their family, their friends, the surveys, and these different things to just get in that practice mode of let me try some things, let me see what works. And eventually, like anything else, you'll start to get better the more you do it.
Great. So thanks for that. So, Derek, it's been a lot of fun. We covered I got all my notes here. We got lots of good stuff there. Really good practical tips at different levels, high level overview, and then really digging into some of the tactics and even down to specific words. So I want to say a big thank you for coming on and being part of the Self-Publishing Summit. And thanks so much for all those great ideas, strategies, and tactics.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Glad to be here.
Pleasure. Thanks, Derek.